Now we'll begin factoring by what's called grouping. So by the end of this, hopefully we should be able to factor a polynomial that has 4 terms. So the idea is that we want to rewrite our polynomial as a product. So we're going to be starting with something of the form ax squared, and I'm going to use a p and a q here instead of the typical b that maybe you're used to. So we're going to start with something like this, ax squared plus px plus qx plus c. And what we want to do is we want to be able to rewrite that as some sort of linear equation. So something like, shouldn't use a b, how about alpha x plus beta times sigma x plus delta. So our goal is to rewrite our polynomial, our quadratic, as a product of 2 linear equations. So let's start with 10ab plus 15b plus 4a plus 6. So the process that we're going to go through is we're going to actually group our terms into 2 separate pieces. So I'm first going to look at what I've underlined in green. So the 10ab plus 15b. You want to ask yourself, just based on those two, what's the greatest common factor that I could pull out? And if you've forgotten that, go back to the greatest common factor video that we did. So my greatest common factor should be 5b. And if I pull out a 5b, I believe that leaves me with 2a plus 3. So that takes care of our first set. Then we're going to look at our next 2 terms, and we're going to do the same thing. So the greatest common factor of 4a and 6 is 2. And once I factor out this 2, I'll get 2a plus 3. There we go. And now something should have happened, right? I don't know if you see it, but do you see how this 2a plus 3 appears in both of my terms? So what that means is that I can actually factor that out. So now I'm factoring out a 2a plus 3. So when I factor out this 2a plus 3, what that means, and I'm going to rewrite this over here. So I had 5b times 2a plus 3 plus 2 times 2a plus 3. When I factor it out, what I'm going to do is divide both terms by that 2a plus 3. And what I'm left with is 5b from the first one and just 2 from my second one. So I've rewritten this to be a product, 2a plus 3 times 5b plus 2. And now let's try that again. So I'm first going to group my first 2 terms. So 6x squared plus 9xy. My greatest common factor, well, for the coefficient would be 3, and then looks like x. No y because y doesn't appear in both terms. Once I factor that out, so I'm going to divide both terms by 3x. That gives me 2x plus 3y. And now I'll move on to my next set. What I want to look at is what is the greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor of 14 and 21 will be 7, and then the x and y don't have a common factor, so just 7. The question is, should you make it positive or negative? Well, because this 14 was negative, I'm going to pull out a negative 7, which means I'm going to divide both terms by negative 7, which gives me 2x plus 3y. And it's a plus 3y because it was a negative 21 divided by negative 7. We have a similar situation happening here, where I have a term that's repeated. So I'll pull that term out. And now we're dividing both terms by 2x plus 3y. When I do that, I'm left with 3x from my first term and minus 7 from my second. So we factored our polynomial as 2x plus 3y times 3x minus 7. So let's do the same thing again. If I look at my first two terms, my greatest common factor, I believe, is just x. 5 and 8 don't share any factors. So when I pull out my x, so divide both these by x, I get 5y minus 8. Then I'll look at my next two. 10 and 16, those share a common factor of 2. And I'm going to pull out a negative 2 because that 10 was negative, right? This negative tells me. So when I pull out that negative 2, so I'm dividing both these by negative 2, that gives me 5y minus 8. It's a negative 8 because I had positive 16 divided by negative 2. What I notice is that 5y minus 8 repeated, so I'm going to pull that out. So that means I'm dividing both terms by 5y minus 8. In my first term, I'm left with x. In my second term, I'm left with negative 2. So this would factor as 5y minus 8 times x minus 2. Let's do one more. So first thing I'm going to do is factor out in my first two terms. So 6x cubed and 15x squared, the greatest common factor there would be a 3x squared. So I'll divide both of them by 3x squared. And that should give me 2x minus 5. Next, I will look at my 2x minus 5. Well, those actually don't have any common factors, so I'm going to pull out a 1. Dividing everything by 1 doesn't do anything, so I just get 2x minus 5. Now the 2x minus 5 repeated, so I'm going to be factoring out a 2x minus 5, which means I should divide everything by 2x minus 5, which gives me a 3x squared in the first part and a 1 in the second. So I factor this as 2x minus 5 times 3x squared plus 1.